Okay, folks, we're going to get started. It is great to have a lot of our families from our community here tonight for our wellness night. We're trying something new, kind of a combination wellness night to get the year started off correctly. We want healthy kids making healthy choices to set the right atmosphere for our whole year ahead of us, both in sports and everything else we do here at Tantasqua. So we're going to have the District Attorney Joe Early's here to speak to you about some legal issues surrounding drugs and alcohol and other things. Go ahead and give Mr. Early a hand. And then we've got Dr. Malvey to talk here about concussions, former grad from many moons ago. Come back here to speak to you about concussions. And our new athletic director, Kara Ellis, will speak about athletic program here. So give her a hand. Great to have her working with us. So we've got a lot planned. It takes parents, it takes the school, it takes all of us working together, our coaches, our teachers, our counselors, everybody working. So if there's anything we can do, please let us know. We want it to be a successful 4 years of high school for your kids. Without further ado, our District Attorney, Joe Early.
Thank you, Principal Lucas, and thank you, Tantasqua. It's great to be back out here again. I'm going to be real brief, and then Michael, one of my ADAs, is going to put on a little bit of a PowerPoint for you on social host liability, because there's a lot, believe me, there's a lot that you don't know. And I'm going to be brief. The reason I'm going to be brief is you ever hear anyone say, geez, that guy just didn't speak long enough? But I'm going to get to the point. Three things. One, with regards to drinking. Drinking is our biggest problem, by far. The opioid addiction, the opioid crisis is in the news lately. But 2/3 of the addicted people in this country are addicted to alcohol. And it's become part of the social norm. The Budweiser, Coors Light, Miller Lite, it doesn't matter who they are. When they advertise, they make it sexy. When they advertise, they put on the TV screen trigger points. Trigger points that mean if you're susceptible to drinking, you see those trigger points, as many as 17 trigger points might come up, 20 trigger points might come up during a commercial to try and get you to drink. And I'll tell you this, to kids, what we found out, having a couple of drinks, having a couple of beers, it affects your performance, especially when you're an athlete. It can set back aspects of your training as much as 2 weeks, and this is scientifically proven. To adults, and I'll tell you this because I did it myself, one of my kids one day at the dinner table, Dad, how many beers have you had tonight? I don't drink beer at the dinner table anymore. Because what we do know is you're modeling for your kids. Everything you do, you're modeling for your kids. And whether it be your coach, whether it be a guidance counselor, teacher, the person they look to the most for guidance is you. So I made that choice not to do it. I'm not gonna preach, but I made that choice not to do it. 2, texting and driving. We just had a great seminar out here not too long ago, and I just want to repeat it for anyone who was here or wasn't here. The hardest part of my job is talking to people in pain. The hardest part of my job is talking to people in pain. And inevitably, when I'm in a school setting, I talk to people, and they say, Joe, what's the worst case you ever had? Excuse me, what's the worst case you ever had? And of course, it's a homicide. It's a murder. It's something along those lines. And I try not to talk about that, but I talk about the hardest part of my job, and that's talking to people in pain. And we've lost 2 people within the last month to texting and driving accidents, to when they got diverted and pulled their eyes off the road. And ironically enough, in both instances, they were adults. If you don't want your kids doing it, we can't do it either. In kids, we know that if you're texting and driving, especially when you've got that new license, the first 6 months, you're 23 times more likely to be involved in an accident. Third, I'm going to talk about something that I've gotten real smart on real fast, and I never thought I would have to, and that's opioids. There's a great book out there called Dreamland by Sam Quinones. We had the author come in, and he talks about how Purdue Pharmaceutical made $36 billion, with a B, billion dollars, telling the American public that opioids, specifically OxyContin, is non-addictive. Well, they're on the Forbes 500 list of the richest families in the country, but it's blood money. We lost almost 60,000 people last year to this chronic brain disease, and that's what it is. Because the governor and lieutenant governor made some great strides, but still, when you get a kid go in and get a wisdom tooth out, The most they can get is a 7-day supply of opioids. That's still 30 pills. So monitor that, watch that. They've told us, you know, kind of ironic, my mother in the day would give me a prescription, but she wouldn't let me take an opioid, Tylenol and an Advil together because you weren't supposed to mix them. Now they say it's okay. And an Advil and a Tylenol is almost as powerful as a Percocet to help relieve the pain. Try alternatives. And I will beg you and tell you this. If you've gone through a prescription and you still have those opioids in your medicine cabinet, you've got to get rid of them. You've got to get rid of them. Because what we know is that when kids get hold of opioids, when adults get hold of opioids, at some point a genetic switch goes off and then you're done. And then you're done. So I've said 3 things. You know, I hate being Joey Downer, but I know this. The hardest part of my job is talking to people in pain. The best part of my job is preventing crime. And if anyone was listening tonight, you take any of these messages to heart, you might save your message, you might save your kid's message, you might save your life, you might save your kid's life. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my assistant DA, Mike Cherry. Thank you.
All right, so good evening, everybody. First and foremost, I just want to thank the faculty and staff, the parents, and the students that are here tonight for inviting the DA's office out to come to participate in this event. You know, I also want to thank my boss, Joe Early, not because he's my boss. He's standing right there. It's really been a privilege, great experience working for him, because one of the things that he encourages his assistants to do is get out there and talk to people and make these connections and do these types of events. And it's really a terrific experience getting to make connections and talk to people in this room, talk to people in high school as you're coming of age and, really living your life. It's just probably the best part of the job. But we couldn't do it, without the people in the room. So tonight I'm here to talk about social host liability law and some laws related to alcohol. None of the talk is to scare or frighten anybody, but rather what we try to do is give you the information necessary to make those healthy choices that probably many of you in the room are constantly hearing about. In this day and age, healthy choices are important because bad choices in this day and age with social media, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, things like that, mistakes can really follow you for a long time. Many of you are in high school now, and you could be in trouble in high school if some of the stuff hits social media, or you make these bad decisions that might follow you. But you've also got jobs, you've also got college coming up that you're thinking about, and college recruiters and college admission staff are going to be looking at this type of stuff. So when you listen to these types of talks, it's just really important that you take a little bit of it in, and it really is just to give you information so that you make those good choices. So with that said, I am here to talk about social host liability law. So people often ask, what is social host? What is the social host liability law? This will come up nice and slow. But the social host liability law essentially says that anybody who controls a premises, anybody who controls a property, like a home, a hotel room, even in some cases private function halls, that allow alcohol to be served and consumed within those premises. You open yourself up and you become a social host. When you open yourself up and you become the social host, you open yourself up to certain liabilities. There's potential crimes, criminal crimes, and there's liabilities, civil liabilities. So in the DA's office, we prosecute violations of criminal law. So we work with the police, and when you go to court, we're the ones that are trying to hold you accountable. But there's also civil liability, and that's when, like a slip and fall case, 2 private people will be joined in a lawsuit. And the social host liability law opens you up to both of those things. I apologize. So anytime you allow any type of guests, even if, let's say you have a party at your house and somebody's parents say, sure, you can have a couple drinks, you become a social host liability. Even if you think you have permission to consume alcohol on those premises, you think everything's going to be okay, the person who's allowing alcohol to be consumed on their property becomes a social host. And here's just some examples of what some premises properties that could open you up to the social host liability law. So the social host liability law requires a negligence standard. Really what a negligence standard is that you have a duty to use care to protect your guests. Anytime you invite somebody onto your property, you're having a party, whether it's a cookout, a barbecue, graduation party, prom party, you owe a certain duty of care to your guests to protect them, to keep them safe. And when you don't meet that standard, when, let's say, somebody consumes too much alcohol, and then they take off, they get behind the wheel of the car, they go out and they get in an accident, well, now you're potentially liable as the host of that party. So this is something that affects the students in the room, and certainly affects the parents and property owners in the room. A student has a party, it opens up their parents to this social host liability law. And students themselves could be charged with certain crimes if they host parties and allow alcohol or furnish alcohol, serve alcohol to people, even if it's just, a couple cans of beer or some hard alcohol that you might find in the house. All that type of stuff opens you up to these penalties under this law. So this just gets into a little bit of the civil side of it with two private parties. So, one kid's parents might sue another kid's parents if that kid gets hurt attending a party. And it doesn't have to be something crazy like somebody gets in a car accident. I mean, this could be a couple drinks at a party. You think you're hanging out with your friends. Maybe there's a couple of you, 5, 7, 10. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. Somebody slips and falls down the stairs because they're drinking too much and they can't navigate the stairs properly. So they slip and they fall, they get hurt. That's the type of stuff that the homeowner now becomes, your parents become liable under the social host liability law. So I'm sure when you're hanging out and you're getting together and all this stuff, this type of stuff is not in the forefront of your mind. You're not really thinking about, if somebody slips and falls down a couple of stairs or if somebody gets in a car accident. But why this is important and why these types of talks are important and why we give you this information is to get the parents in the room and to get the students in the room thinking about these types of issues that could happen. Because one thing I can assure you is when things get so bad that it's in the DA's office hands because somebody's been charged with the crime, I promise you that the people that are involved in those situations never thought it could happen to them. So this is all stuff that everybody in the room affects, the parents and the students equally. And especially those of you that are in the room, I think many of you are student athletes. You guys and girls are held to all sorts of different standards under the code of conduct for student athletes and things like that. So there's just a lot riding on these types of situations for the people that are in this room, both parents and students alike. So some other laws related to alcohol that may affect people in this room. And we do see these from time to time in the DA's office. So furnishing alcohol to a minor. This type of stuff opens you up to jail sentences, to fines. Anytime somebody lets somebody under 21 in their house and they're drinking alcohol, potentially, that's furnishing alcohol to a minor. Contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Again, jail time and possible fines under that law. So contributing to delinquency, if they're missing school or, they're getting in trouble because they're drinking at somebody's house. A parent might think, they can just drink in the basement, it's not a big deal. Well, there you go, now it's contributing to a delinquency of a minor. So again, no one thinks these things could happen to them, but we actually do in the DA's office throughout the county. We do see these pop up from time to time. Oftentimes police departments will do undercover sort of things where they'll try to have somebody, they'll have somebody set up to say, can you buy, I'm under 21, can you buy me alcohol? And, just to see if there's anybody out there that is actually doing it, or they'll test the, the package stores, the liquor stores, whether or not they're actually selling to underage kids. So this is stuff that does happen, it is real, we see it from time to time. So just basically what furnishing is, right? So furnishing is allowing anybody to consume or possess alcohol if you're serving it to them. Maybe not necessarily serving it to them, but you invite them over your house, you're having a couple drinks in the kitchen, that's furnishing alcohol to a minor. And again, just some examples of when that could take place. So here's a couple slides, and again, this just goes to the, it can never happen to me type of situation. So here's a couple slides, some news stories, some just headline grabs. This is a situation in Plainville. Huge party, obviously, over 50 people. People are arrested. They're going to be brought before the court. That's when they come to see us, and that's not too fun. It costs some money to hire a lawyer. You don't really want to deal with us day to day in the courthouse. So the other important thing is this example is from Plainville. Well, these type of situations happen all over the Commonwealth to all sorts of different people. Every single town. So here we have a Harvard doctor. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor or wherever you come from, whatever town you're in, Sturbridge, I think Holland's another town down here that is part of the school system where it doesn't discriminate. Any of these situations could arise in any one of these towns. So, here we have a Harvard doctor. Parents, this is something for you to think about. Oftentimes, these stories make the media. They make the newspapers because it sounds good. It sounds good, it sells papers, it draws people's attentions to Fox 25 or ABC at night at 10 o'clock, oh, a big underage drinking party in Sturbridge, 50 people arrested. That's making the news. So now the students are in the news, the parents are in the news. Here we have a nice clip of this Harvard doctor who allowed a party to be hosted at his house. It's just nothing that you want. It's nothing that you want to be a part of. And all these situations, when it boils down to it, it could be avoided by people just making smarter decisions and being aware of what's going on. So here's a North Andover couple. Here they are, Fox 25, they're on the news. Two parents allowed for an underage drinking party at their house. Now they wind up before the court. They're being charged under the social host liability law. Furnishing alcohol to minors, I'm sure, is thrown in there. But there they are, another town. A mother and son duo. Mother and son host an underage drinking party. They're arrested. Both of them are before the court. Again, it makes the news. This is a photograph of why we give. This is why we give these types of talks. Again, people think this could never happen to me. It's never going to happen. What's the worst that could happen? We're just having a couple beers. Well, this is the worst that could happen. And so this is the type of face and this is the type of story that we try to remember when we give these types of talks so that you can all be aware of what could happen. So this is Taylor. She was a 17-year-old high school senior here in Massachusetts. One night was drinking. I believe the story is she was attending a game. People had seen her. Again, I'm sure what started out as a harmless night is no big deal. We're just hanging out with friends. Well, unfortunately, Taylor passed away because that night she had drowned in a very shallow body of water. Really tragic, sad case that could have been avoided if people make decisions where they're aware of the consequences of their behavior. Because the fact of the matter is that many people in this room soon or at some point in their life are going to be faced with a situation in which they're drinking. Or maybe there's some drug use or things like that. And in high school, it's really easy to get caught up. It's not too long ago that I was in the students' shoes that are sitting in this room, where you go to a party and you get caught up in this kind of mob mentality where people are having a couple beers and sometimes somebody wants to drink the most and then you want to go drink that person. Whether it's alcohol or drugs, this stuff gets real quick. And it affects people differently. Everybody in this room, parents, students, it doesn't matter. Alcohol, drugs, they affect everyone differently. Everyone reacts differently. But what it does is it causes you to lose control. It causes you to have this ability that we can't think like you normally would. And that's when things like slipping down a flight of stairs happens, where unfortunately ending up in a shallow body of water, a swampy area, which normally you wouldn't end up in. But you can't function, you can't think, you can't perceive things as you would if you were sober, playing the football game, or playing basketball, or field hockey, or whatever it is, whatever sport you guys do. You do it well because you're sober, you're in shape, you practice, you exercise. But when you introduce drugs or alcohol into your body, especially your first couple times, it affects everybody differently. And it takes control of you in a way that you wouldn't normally experience. And it causes you to make those decisions that you wouldn't normally make. So this is the ultimate reason why we're out here trying to give these types of discussions. This is the face of what could go wrong. It did go wrong, a very sad story. Here's a 21-year-old man from Plymouth. Again, it doesn't matter where you're at in the Commonwealth. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you do, what your job is. These types of situations affect everybody across the Commonwealth. He got in trouble because he bought minors alcohol. Well, now he's going to jail. So the jail sentences are real. They happen. The fines are real. They happen. Probation is real. It happens. So another thing to go hand in hand with this is, so how do we be responsible? So particularly to the parents, it's really just common sense when it comes to this stuff. Limit the number of guests. Know who's coming to your house, what they're bringing, what they're doing, where it is that they're going after they leave your house. This is more about the civil aspect of the social liability. So possibly lawsuits and parents, people who own their homes. The fact of the matter is most insurance companies aren't going to cover this type of stuff. Somebody gets hurt, somebody gets killed. Your home insurance is not going to cover it. So then you're out all this money, you have to hire lawyers. It's just nothing that you want to be a part of. Some more underage drinking laws, child endangerment, being a minor in possession. So anybody who in the room is under 21, you get caught with a beer, you get caught with hard alcohol, wine, whatever it might be, that's against the law. You can get charged. You can go to the juvenile court. Just nothing that you want to be a part of. The other thing that is much different from when I was your age is the laws around driving have gotten way stricter. So those people in this room that were either just gotten their license or about to get their license or getting their permit, maybe doing driver's ed, the potential penalties that you guys face if you screw up even once from the RMV, it's amazing how strict they've done. So I can assure you that you don't want to be caught and you don't want any part of having open containers of alcohol in your car. You're going to lose your license for years. So just again, something you really need to be aware of. Other crimes where people think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. Operating under the influence of alcohol. So OUI, drunk driving. That's something that we see in the district court every single day. And it happens to everybody. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you're going, what you're doing. People that have a couple drinks, they get behind the wheel, they think, no big deal. I'm fine, I can drive. Again, the alcohol or the drugs are not allowing you to think the way you normally would. And you end up making a stupid decision that ends up impacting the rest of your life. One thing that's alarming that I like to include is one of the youth behavioral surveys. They might do it in the school where they give you a questionnaire, have you ever tried drugs? Have you ever tried alcohol? How often? Do you know anybody who does it? Half of all students who use alcohol rode in a car with somebody who else also consumed alcohol. So that's when those types of situations happen, in which there's a car accident. Somebody who's 17, maybe is just drinking for the first time, doesn't know what they're doing. Then they find they can't operate their car, end up getting in a car accident. Some more just lines from the headline. Just really terrible stuff. Somebody who gets injured, the father, the homeowner, social host, that's what SH is. Somebody had fallen, they fractured their skull, didn't even know. Stepping over the body, well, that's the type of stuff that could happen. One of the most tragic cases is here, an 18-year-old who provided alcohol at his home. Another person leaves the home to go get more alcohol, ends up getting into a car accident where he kills 2 other people. So you can't sit and say, oh, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Again, parents, if students are hosting parties, it could open you up to certain liabilities, so it's something to keep in mind. Parents and students, one thing that I always try to say and include in the slide is just keep open lines of communication. Talk about these things. Where are you going? Who's coming? Who's going to be there? Parents should be talking to parents. Keep open lines of communication so that everybody knows what's going on, where who's going to hang out at whose house, so that these types of accidents really don't happen. That just gets into a little bit of that. One thing that I always kind of say, there's some towns in which if parents are going to be away, they don't want parties, you can notify the police department. Sometimes they have forms. You can just go into the dispatch and just let them know, hey, I'm not going to be home. No one should be over my house. Can you keep an eye on it? So not only do you have faculty and staff at the school that you could talk to, but you also have your police departments. And a lot of the police departments around the county, especially in the towns, are great resources. They're here to help. They understand. They know their community. They know the people. And it's just one resource that you, the parents especially, can use in this room. And again, more of these suggestions are just about keeping open lines of communication. And so here, that just gets into using the police department as some of your, I mean, essentially this is really the whole talk in its entirety. But again, nothing to scare anybody necessarily, but just to give you the information to make those healthy choices as you continue the rest of the school year, so that you really don't get involved in these types of tragic stories, because they could happen to anyone at any time. But again, I do appreciate the community inviting us out to give these types of talks. I hope everybody has a great school year, and I do hope everybody ends up making healthy choices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe and Mike. Parents, after our next speaker, Dr. Todd Malvey, we're going to have out in the main foyer, we have Melissa, our new cafeteria director, is out there, wants to talk about healthy options. If you have any questions about breakfast or lunch, you can do that. We have Ellen and Elizabeth from the DA's office. They have Hidden Plain Sight. It's kind of a mock bedroom, teenager bedroom, where they might hide things. So parents, please check that out before you leave tonight. Students, do not check that out. You're already experts at hiding things. And then we have a great new program in our community called Learn for Life. And I don't know who saw the fire trucks coming in. So for instance, Sturbridge Fire Department's looking for students aged 14 to 21 who are interested in a potential career as a firefighter. So please go talk to them at the table also. There's a wide variety of possible internships. We send out about 100 seniors every year on internships with alums and local community groups. This is another opportunity for kids, but you have to have parents' permission to do it, and parents need to really sign up your kids because it's not run by the school. Without further ado, I know we're getting antsy. Warm welcome for Tantasqua grad, Dr. Malvey.
Thank you. 1991 grad, thanks. I'd like to thank you guys for that great talk, that was awesome. Also, I'm parked on a curb, so I'm really glad you guys are here. If I get towed, you can vouch for me. Okay, so this is a little more for the student athletes. Everyone else, if you want to look at your phones and ignore me, that's fine, but all the kids who play sports, please pay attention. I'm going to talk about concussions. These are very common. At least 10% of all student athletes get one. What is a concussion? In short, your skull is a hard rock. Your brain is soft and squishy inside. There's fluid around your brain. The brain is not attached to anything at all. If you shake your head, if it gets hit, if it gets struck, if there's a rotational blow, your brain will shake around. It may bang into the skull inside your head. That causes injury to your brain. Sometimes we can see that on CAT scans, MRIs. A concussion we cannot. You can only see it if you take pieces of the brain out. Are they common in athletes? Absolutely. Like I said, at least 10% will get one. What sports? Boys, it's football, it's hockey, it's lacrosse. 8 o'clock, I get to go pick up one of my sons from hockey. I watch him and his team like a hawk while I'm there. Girls, women's soccer. Women's soccer. Men's soccer is low. Women's soccer very high. Why? We're not exactly sure. It might be technique when they head the ball, it might be neck strength, but girls who play soccer, very high rate. Cheerleading as well. If you see down here, cheerleading, 3 times as high incidence as men's baseball. You think a hard baseball being thrown around, hitting kids in the head would be high, but it's not. Cheerleading, 3 times higher than that. So reason why you're all here, or why you take that test before you play a sport every year, is this law that was enacted in 2010 that requires you to take that head injury test course online before you play a sport. I know what you do. You turn it on the computer, you let it run, you go eat a bowl of cereal, something like that, you come back and you answer that test. But it is an important thing to get information from. Also in this law, it mandates that if you believe your child has a concussion, or the trainer believes that, or the coach does, they have to see a healthcare provider to get cleared to go back and play. This is the SCAT-5 form. This is a pretty much universally accepted online and locker room assessment tool. Trainers use this, doctors like myself use this. It's a questionnaire. It used to be brief. The SCAT-1 was brief. SCAT-5 is 9 pages long. If they keep going on with this, it'll be like the tax code. But it is a way for us to identify if someone has a concussion and if it, you know, will prohibit them from going back on the field or court to play. So why do you need to see someone like me? One of the reasons is so I can make sure that it's not something else besides a concussion. Some sports, you might get a knocked out tooth. Everyone's concerned about the knocked out tooth. Well, I'm concerned about that, but the head injury too. The other is there's a head injury, and you know, it may be more of the neck or somewhere else that's hurt. So we just have to make sure if there's something else wrong. I also advise my athletes what to expect, how this concussion, how the symptoms will slowly improve over time. Most important for the kids, you get a note to go back to school and play or not. That note to go back to school may include no homework, no tests. I have to determine a period of time to hold you out from school. So that's one other reason why you have to come in. And then we establish with the player, the coach, the trainer, the mom and dad, how we're going to get you back to the field or not. So these are some of the things I think about when someone has a head injury. The image on the left here, that's a epidural hematoma or bleed in the head. This is an arterial bleed, very high pressure bleed. If you have this, you may not live more than a few hours or a day. This is something that you will, typically the athlete will drop, okay? The center one is a subdural bleed. This is a venous bleed, a lower pressure bleed. Symptom onset can be hours or days with this one. Typically this is not fatal if we catch it early enough and treat it quickly enough. So there's a little bit of time with this one. The one on the third, it looks horrible, but it's not too bad. It's a subarachnoid bleed. This is one that may not show up for about a week or so. So if someone has symptoms that seem to be worsening after a week, this is one that I think may be going on inside their head, and it might prompt me to get a CAT scan done. Does everyone need to get imaging of their head? That's kind of the number one thing. Parents bring their kids in, say, I want to get a CAT scan, make sure they're clear and can go back and play. Well, in a concussion, CAT scans and MRIs look fine. So if it's truly a concussion, there's really no reason to get one. CT scan of the head gives you a radiation dose of about 100 chest x-rays. So unless you want your kid to stand in front of a chest x-ray machine 100 times, there's really no reason to get a CAT scan each time. So we're a little bit judicious with deciding who we get these scans on. There are certain signs that are very concerning to us on that SCAT-5 form I showed you before. There's a little red box that has red flags, and many of these are in there. So certainly if a person's passing out, vision issues. Vomiting right away after the head injury is very common. Vomiting a day or two later or a week later is not, and that's a concern for increased pressure within the head. Headaches and fogginess are common. Everyone that gets a concussion is going to have those two things. So those two we're not too concerned about, but everything up here we are. You don't need to know that, not for this group. Everyone wants to know right away, how bad is it? Is it a bad one? Is it mild, moderate, or severe? I don't know until it's gone. We basically grade them as a concussion with brief symptoms, so a person gets their head hit. Symptoms may go away within half hour to a few hours, or it could be more prolonged. Sometimes I get confused. It seems okay that first day, they said the first night they felt fine, then they wake up, go to school, they try to do work, they take a test, their head pounds, and I said, all right, maybe we need to back off. So there's really only 2 grades now. Multiple concussions are a big concern. Why? Well, there may be a reason why the child, the student athlete, is getting these over and over again. Maybe they had a low threshold to start with. Maybe there's some kind of congenital abnormality inside their skull or neck. Maybe they use poor technique, particularly in football, if they're spear tackling all the time as well. Back to that previous slide about the Massachusetts law, one of the things in there is to really harp on teaching proper technique in sports, and that's a way to stop these things. What else is a concern? Well, in multiple concussions, you have more chance of CTE, dementia, and other personality and mood disorders. This, hope everyone can see it, slide on the left is normal brain, normal nerves in the brain. The one in the center is brain after at least 5 head injuries. The one on the right is after 10. All that black gook is not supposed to be there, obviously. The left does not have that. All that interferes with how the nerves interact with each other. And so if you've seen the movies out there and all the NFL stuff, this is what they're concerned about. I think I heard Erin Hernandez today, his brain tested for this as well. So lastly, return to play. I touched on this a little bit before. You need to rest your brain. You need to rest it from exercise, you need to rest it from thinking. So when a concussion is determined to have occurred, I will typically write a note for school, and I have this big long note that says, you know, you can take notes for 1 hour, you can take it for none, no tests, you can only have someone else take notes for you, or you don't go to school at all. But basically, you can't play until your symptoms are gone, and then next slide, I'll tell you what we do. But also, no cell phone, no video games, you know, iPad, all that stuff. That really affects the eyes and the brain. So if a child tells me they have a concussion and the parents let them stay home and they say they're playing, you know, games on the computer for 6 hours a game, I know they're not that bad. Okay. So return to play. All the symptoms have to be completely gone. They have to be completely gone at least a day. Some other doctors are stricter, want all the symptoms gone for longer than that, but it needs to be at least 24 hours where they have no symptoms. Then we can have them do some light exercise for that next day. Exercise, bike, walking, maybe jog 100 yards or so, something very light, and then we reassess them. If their symptoms come back over that next day, well then we started too soon and we have to go back to the first step. If they pass that, we go to the next day, and that's we do more sport specific exercise, maybe some drills, but not for too long, half an hour, back them off, wait and see how they do overnight. If still no symptoms, go to the next day. Then they do more drills, maybe a full practice, but nothing with contact. Same thing, keep them out. Next day, they can go to full. If they still feel fine, then they can play. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If a person has a concussion and they resolve within a day, it should take them at least a week to get back on the field or court to play. So if you see someone with a concussion on Wednesday and is playing Friday night, that is wrong. So, as I said, first concussion for this season typically takes about 7 to 10 days till you can get back. If they're having more than that in the same season, that's when we start to get more concerned. Remember the slides with the brain tissue, and it doesn't look good. So if you're having a second in the season, we hold you out longer. it's very different. There's a difference of opinion between doctors, but a lot of us will hold you out a good week to 2 weeks to a month, depending on how severe your symptoms were, particularly if the symptoms didn't go away for several days or a week or two. So I tell my athletes all the time, this is the first concussion, it's the first week of the year. If you get another one, you're probably not going to play the rest of this season. So that kind of stops them from rushing out there too quick, because it, you know, if they want to make the playoffs or game 8 to 12, we have to rest you now. Decisions I have sometimes is to tell someone they got to quit that sport and play something else. It's very hard when they're a pro athlete. Kids, it's probably even harder because mom, dad want them to play. They've been awesome at the sport their whole life, but sometimes we need to say pick something else to play. So if their symptoms are just weighing them down all their time, their personality has changed, their schoolwork has changed, you know, it's really time to say let's play something else. So a lot of schools, apparently this one too, schools and teams will do preseason concussion testing. Impact is one that I've used a lot in the past. I believe it's used here as well. So you do a preseason test. It's kind of like a mini IQ test. If you get a head injury and you say the symptoms are gone, you can then test them again and see if their score is the same. Did they go back to baseline or not? This is not a fail-safe, but what it can tell us if someone's lying. If they say, oh, I feel great, they take their impact test again and it stinks, we know, all right, what's up? And then they'll finally fess up. We can't tell it's a concussion on any MRIs, CAT scan, any of those things. We're trying to find other stuff that may diagnose this. Functional MRI, PET scans, all these things, nothing's mainstream yet. So for final, concussions are very serious. They can cause decrease in your brain function, your personality to change, impulsive behavior, drug and alcohol use. So I hope everyone takes them very seriously. For parents, coaches, don't leave them alone. There's been some instances, I know one soccer player got drilled in the head with the ball, head hurt. Coach said, all right, I think you've got a head injury, why don't you go sit down? Trainer checked them out, said go call your mom. They did, went back to school, called the mom, field was across the street, and lo and behold, mom picks them up an hour after and they're blind in one eye. All right, so don't leave them alone. They should have known that that person's symptoms got worse. Don't play with any sign or symptom. We use that stepwise approach to return a play. That should minimum take 1 week. And our catchy saying is, when in doubt, sit them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malvey. And we hooked him up with a nice tie as a Tantasqua alum from Miss Joseph. He's a warrior for life. So you students, anything's possible. We won't talk about his behavior history when he was here at Tantasqua, but he turned out okay.